Lifetime manuscripts of the great Uzbek poet Alishera Навои. To see them with one's own eyes is a shock for everyone. A well-rounded and gifted person, devoted humanist and intellectual, philosopher and poet, statesman and philanthropist, Alishera Навои is a phenomenal historical figure. For more than 5 centuries, his heritage has been a priceless literary treasure, deeply appreciated all over the world. Today we will show you unique tomes that were created in ancient Khorasan during the poet's own lifetime, which, by a twist of fate, are now kept in St. Petersburg at the National Library of Russia. A long-time custodian and the head of the library's Eastern Manuscript Fund, Ольгой Валентиновной, will help us immerse ourselves into the atmosphere of the intense intellectual life of Alishera Навои and the story of how these priceless tomes were created. Within the framework of the project, Treasures of Uzbekistan's Cultural Heritage in Museums of the World will tell you amazing stories, sometimes real, sometimes mystical, about Навоi's manuscripts. But first, some historical facts. The National Library of Russia was established in the year 1795 by Catherine II. Back then, it was the Imperial Public Library that opened for visitors only 19 years after. The Eastern Manuscripts Department counts 28,000 rare manuscripts in 25 languages. From library works carved in stone to book masterpieces of the Eastern Renaissance. Навоi's manuscripts have a special place in the Muslim world of the National Library of Russia. 3 of them were released in the capital of the Timurid Sultanate, Herat, during the poet's lifetime. The earliest of them was written by Alishera Навои at the age of 25. It was written by his friend and companion, a famous calligrapher, Sultan Ali Mashhadi. The early diwan by Alishera Навои, Gharaib al-Sughar, dated 1465 and 66, consists of lyrical poems, ghazals and rubaiyats. The biggest rarity is the so-called early diwan. It was rewritten when the author was only 25 years old. See the difference? This is when the author wrote, created this, and beautifully rewritten by a calligrapher. His art wasn't widely known when he wrote this, but only 2 centuries after, or even more. Before that, it was at a very elite level. He was a part of that elite. He was surrounded by intellectual and artistic elite, as well as political elite, because he was a statesman and a friend of Sultan Husayn Baykara. As we know, Nizamuddin Alishera Навои started writing poetry at a very early age, but the poet didn't form them in collections, diwans. He started doing that only following the recommendation by his foster brother, friend and the governor of Khorasan, Sultan Husayn Baykara, at whose court calligraphy, miniature art and poetry were flourishing. Alishera Навои often recited his poems during the court's mushairas, poetic contests. Prosperous is the nation and flourishing is the dominion where the law is fair and the oppression is indefensible. In now attention, today we won't talk about the art of this genius poet, which is a separate intellectual page in the book of world culture. Ольга Васильева will tell us about the way book relics of the time were made. Manuscript is a fruit of labor, a material object created by many people with the poet being somewhere at the beginning. Who made the paper? A calligrapher, a gilder, who drew the frames, who made the ink, who was responsible for margins, decorated the cover. There is a crowd of people. You're telling a really classified information because manuscripts are viewed as masterpieces, yes. And here you say that many people worked on just a single page. I'm drawing your attention to the fact that not everyone could afford such a luxury. Of course, there are manuscripts made for ordinary readers. But in the 15th and the 16th century, ordinary people didn't read Alишер Навои. There are no such. It's possible only in the 17th and 18th century, as the manuscripts were rewritten at madrasas or anywhere. He was already popular. Manuscripts written centuries ago are also special because their typography, design, etc. could be made in different times. Let's take a look at what was made when the poet was 25. Well, first, we see that it's multicolored paper. So I wanted to ask, why was this kind of paper chosen? We don't consider the margins, as they were added only within 100 years. We consider the paper only, the multicolored paper. It is believed that in Hira they started using multicolored paper for manuscripts, while the idea itself was borrowed from China. This kind of paper started being used in approximately 1430. Later on, in the 16th century, it will become widespread. But in the 15th century, it was quite a rare thing. Take a look at the golden dust. The paper was finished with it before the calligrapher started writing on it. So the spray was done before, not after. And you can see the dust even here. It wasn't a common thing. And it came from China as well. But the Chinese specks were big, though these smaller specks started being used in Herat during the 30s. I mean, the manuscript was written, say, 30 years after that manner was introduced. So we all understand that the person who ordered this divan was wealthy. Because this kind of paper with golden spray wasn't a common thing to make in the 15th century. This marks the high rank of the client. But the calligrapher's art was the most precious thing in making a manuscript. Calligraphers' works were highly appreciated. It was a diamond, the diamond that was given a new frame as the old one became worn out, when the cover started falling apart. A new owner realizes what a treasure he has and gives it a new frame for that diamond. Navoi's early divan was rewritten by an outstanding calligrapher of Herat, Sultan Ali Mashhadi. There is an inscription saying Diwan Mir Alишер Навои, rewritten by Sultan Ali Mashhadi. It's in Nastaliq style, quite big letters. Sultan Mashhadi had lived a long artistic life. He began with a big Nastaliq, then we see a finer one, but then by the end of his life he lost his hand steadiness and his sight was not perfect, so he went back to writing big letters that were not quite even. And still his works were highly appreciated and collected in albums. Do you think he held them in his hands? I think he did, even if it wasn't created for the poet. It's hard to believe that the calligrapher didn't show him the work. By that time, Sultan Ali Mashhadi was 33 years old. Later, Navoi became a generous patron of the brilliant master of calligraphy. He even wrote some poetry about him. With his art of rewriting the Quran, he was famous all over the world. Absolutely unmatched. That is why I feel reverence for him. Within 1980 and 1990, Sultan Ali Mashhadi made nearly 10 copies of Navoi's early poetic diwan and khamsa. This is a privilege of a high-ranking master. Before the calligrapher started rewriting, he would pray a lot. It was work that pleased God. Word as an ocean is its first guise, word spoken is the second, and word written is the third. This is God as well. Manuscripts rewritten by Sultan Ali Mashhadi were meant to be gifts. He used to give them to Sultan Hussein and his children, and some other people of high ranks. If it's written that the manuscript is to Sultan Hussein, it doesn't mean that he was the client because it could be paid for by Alишер Навои. What does it mean? That the poet, whether he was aware of that or not, did everything to keep his works, to make them reach us. He paid for the manuscripts himself, and now we can enjoy these masterpieces. But the most important question that interested us was how this precious manuscript turned out to be in St. Petersburg. There were 18 manuscripts that Khad Khalishah Khoja sent to Nikolai I after the Russian ambassador Alexander Sergeyevich Griboyedov was killed in Tehran. It was a complicated situation back then. One war ended while another could begin. They agreed that Iran would rather make an apology while Russia would accept it. Khalishah's grandson, Khasraf Mirza, was to head the diplomatic mission. An incredibly handsome 16-year-old young man came to St. Petersburg, and everyone was so excited to see such an exotic person. And apart from the manuscripts, one of the gifts he brought was this Shah diamond that is now kept in Bahrain. The first page of Navoi's early divan has several inscriptions. The first one has a sum of 15 rupees. Rumi was the name for gold coin that was used in the early 19th century. Yes, it's not said here whether the manuscript was sold or bought or given away. There's no information here that it was bought, it's just evaluation. There's one more inscription here with the sum of 1,000 rupees. But again, it's not said that the manuscript was sold for 1,000 rupees. It's again just evaluation. India was not the only country to have rupees. So it's unknown how and where Khalishah bought this manuscript, and we'll hardly ever find out. According to this information, we can presuppose that before Tehran, the manuscript could be in India during the time of the great Mongols, who used to appreciate the art of books, and in the Ottoman Empire. Navoi lived in the times when the art of books reached its highest peak in Herat. In the court workshops, they made and perfected the thinnest and finest paper. The Khamsa by Alishera Навои, rewritten in Herat in 1492 and 1493, is a magnificent masterpiece of bookmaking art. This lifetime manuscript of Навои consists of 5 poems: Wonders of Good People, Farhad and Shirin, Layli and Majnun, 7 Travelers, and Alexander's Wall. In early 19th century, it got to the National Library of Russia from the so-called Ardabil collection. There is no doubt that this manuscript was made in Herat in late 15th century. Its design has direct analogies with other manuscripts made in the 16th century as well. For example, with Navoi's Divan that was rewritten in Tabriz. This Navoi's Divan was precisely rewritten in Tabriz in the year 1528, while this manuscript is dated 1492 and 93. What can it? This is a sign for us that the cover could be made later. I managed to find only 6 combined covers like this in the world. 1, 2, we have 1. There are 2 more in Istanbul and 1 in London. In the library, in the Victoria and Albert Museum. On the one hand, it's the same gold embossing, but here the surface was left without embossing. It's painted with black paint, and the ornament is made in 2 shades of gold. Have a look. Here it's not just gold. One is darker, lacquered, it's half lacquered, half embossed. On the reverse of the first end leaf of the Khamsa, there's an inscription, Khamsa by Alishera Навои, written by the Qibla of Mavlana calligraphers of Sultan Ali Mashhadi, gilded by Muzahib Yari, encased by a gifted master, Sultan Ali Mujalida Kharavi. It's a rare thing when the manuscript has not only the name of the author and the calligrapher, but the rest of the people who had worked on it. It is known that Farsi, or Persian, was a literary language of that epoch. For his poetry in Persian, Navoi used a pen name Takhallus Fani, which means mortal, while he used his poetic name of Navoi, which means singing with inspiration, for his poetry in Turkic language, that he used to call Turki. It was a new literary language created by Navoi, and it was equal in metaphors and poetic harmony to Persian. The richness of the Turkic language is absolutely unquestionable. A nation will learn its faith when the language ripens. The language unites the nation, and this union is the power. He just enjoys the opportunity to write in his mother tongue. Peri looked radiantly young. Among two moons she was the sun. Wherever her glances were cast, people's hearts were burnt to ashes right away. Farhat sees now that she directed her horse when he was by himself, so pale and so sad, depicted working on a plate. He who brought the history to life with strokes of paint unveiled the picture. Two royal generations used to reign over the inhabited lands. Let Khorasan forever flourish, without knowing chaos and misfortunes. When the Lord of the world had built his own town and surrounded it with walls. This is Khamsa, 5 poems by Alишер. The poems' words are as fragrant as the paper they are written on. Навои himself ordered copies of his books, and it was he who paid, because it's no secret that he was very rich. He was a patron who invested money in construction of 370 buildings and then renovated them. He didn't just give his land away, but also collected all revenues from his shops, bazaars, wineries, etc. for keeping order and paying wages to the teachers of that madrasas for supporting mosques. The National Library of Russia has one more lifetime tome by Alишер Навои, Kulliyat, the full collection of poets' works. It was made in the year 1499, the earliest existing collection of poems, lyrics and prose works by Навои that were kept safe. It was made 2 years before the poet died. This lifetime manuscript by Alишер Навои is an absolute rarity, because specialists say there are Навоi's autographs on some pages. The cover was made later, in the 19th century. We got it together with a collection by Nikolai Vasilyevich Khandinkov, the diplomat and general consul in Tabriz, the middle of the 19th century. He also had ethnographic journeys. He visited Khorasan, even made a map of Khorasan, was in the Middle East too. And how did the collectors find this manuscript? Sometimes he would note, bought in Tabriz in the year for 2 months, but nothing is written here. He thought this list to be either Навоi's autograph or with his editing. He supposed that it was written by Alишер Навои. He thought there was too much editing. And it's true, the manuscript with poems and prosaic tracts by Навои has some corrections. And here we can see the signs of multiple restorations. There could be separate books connected together, but now we can't say anything for sure. Kulliyat's handwriting isn't a refined calligraphy. It's obvious that here the main goal was to preserve the content. In the end of the manuscript, consisting of 13 of Навоi's works, there's the word finished, written in Uzbek language instead of tamammat, the Arabic word with the same meaning. The vocabulary is wider in Turkey. There one can find a bigger variety of shades for one word. There is more space for poetic art games. And it's not one word or two, there are 22 of them. And he plays with them. There's a feeling that he's bathing, that he simply scatters pearls. By the way, he often uses the image of pearls in his poetry. So he scatters them, then collects and strings them, then scatters them again. It's a constant pearl game of his, and there's a feeling that he was a happy man. He was happy because he had an opportunity to do that. I heard the Khan of four Uluses, Amir Timur the Great Koragan, directed army with his iron hand, and entered Hind, accepted a dreadful battle, and permanently like his star, he was awarded with victory as always. These rare miniatures are the illustrations for Alишер Навои's great poems. In this respect, the Kulliyat written in Herat in late 15th, early 16th century is of an outstanding value. Specialists believe that it can be Navoi's lifetime manuscript as well. But the 25 miniatures in it were made later, in the 20s of the 16th century. Thanks to them, this Kulliyat is considered unique. Moreover, according to specialists, there is a portrait of Alишер Навои in one of the miniatures. Here we see a standing figure with a staff. This is Alишер Навои, yes. The face is not visible, it is damaged. Quite a serious damage in the miniature. This very figure with a staff, the image that goes back to Begzad. The most famous miniature artist of the Eastern Renaissance, Kamaluddin Begzad, knew Alишер Навои in person. In the years of Sultan Hussein's reign, the court school of fine art was flourishing under Begzad's leadership. The artist created dozens of miniatures to Navoi's poems and ghazals that are now kept in London, Oxford and Manchester. Begzad had lived a long life, 82 years. The place in Herat where his ashes are is a holy place for the whole Muslim world. There is one more unique miniature in this manuscript, illustration of an unknown artist to Navoi's poem Farhat and Shirin. It's called Farhat's Sea Travel. The sea was silver. It grew darker because of silver oxidation. The sea is always black. This miniature resembles two works that are thought to be made by Begzad. Fine art experts notice that this artist has more motion than Begzad. All the pictures are moving, even the static ones. There is some inner expression in them. The name is unknown. The investigations of this relic are not yet over. It's hard to overestimate its value for the history of Transoxiana bookmaking art. It's a true masterpiece that will never fade over the years, just like the heritage of great Alишер Навои. He was a statesman. It's a well-known fact. He was also a patron of arts and a builder at the same time. Things that he did as a patron and builder were maintained for next generations. This is a sort of his second guise. And the third one is his poetry that lives and continues living. This was the project Treasures of Uzbekistan's Cultural Heritage in the Museums of the World.